Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Stelter, president here at the Stelter Company, and thanks for joining us for our webinar today, How to Get Your Board on Board with Planned Giving, presented by Phil Purcell, Director of Planned Giving for the Central Territory of the Salvation Army. I'll get back to introducing Phil in just a minute. First, I'd like to say just a couple quick words about our webinar series. Many of you are familiar with the series, and as an industry leader in planned giving marketing, Stelter has been committed to providing not only innovative solutions, but also education for our industry, and always happy to host these complimentary webinars, as well as a whole slate of webinars throughout the year. Today is actually our first official webinar of 2022. Keep an eye on your inbox and social media feeds in the coming weeks for the rest of the 2022 series. You can always register for all those webinars, not only when you receive those notifications, but also at stelter.com/webinars. And we'll also, as I mentioned, send out those invitations as we draw near. If you want to look at any of the other archives of 2021 or before webinars, those can also be accessed at that webpage. Now back to today's webinar and our presenter, Phil Purcell. Phil, a longtime friend and colleague, has enjoyed a 30-year career in planned giving and currently serves, as I mentioned earlier, the Director of Planned Giving for the Central Territory of the Salvation Army. In this role, he is the directional leader of over 30 planned giving officers over 11 states who close approximately $70 million in planned gifts each year. Phil's an attorney and a member of the American and Indiana State Bar Associations, a senior consultant and lead gift planning attorney for the terrific group at Heaton Smith, a national charitable and estate planning consulting firm. He also, and I always wonder how Phil finds the time, but he also serves as editor for a terrific publication, Planned Giving Today, that many of you have heard of. If you haven't, it's a great one to get a subscription for. It's a monthly national publication. And he's a legal advisor for the Community Foundation Legal Help Desk, a national online subscription service. As we were chatting before the webinar today, Phil teaches many courses, including those on law and philanthropy, nonprofit organizational law, and planned giving, as adjunct faculty for the Indiana University Maurer School of Law and Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy and the Fundraising School. He serves on a myriad of committees and councils, some of which include the Legislation Committee of the American Bar Association's Charitable Giving and Organizations Group, the Tax Exempt Organization Advisory Council for the IRS, the American Council on Gift Annuities, which will have their conference coming up later this year. He's also formerly served on the board of directors for the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, the Charitable Gift Planning Group of Indiana, and the Association of Fundraising Professionals in Indiana. He is a CFRE certified fundraising executive and received his BA degree from Wabash College and his JD and MPA degrees from Indiana University. I'm very excited to introduce Phil Purcell to get us started here for 2022. It's all yours, Phil.
Well, thank you so much, Nathan, for the very kind introduction. And hello, everybody. I hope that all of you are certainly in warmer environments than Nathan and I are. Nathan's in Iowa. It's very cold there, colder than I think Indiana, where I'm located. But we're certainly delighted that you could be with us today to explore this important topic of how to get your board on board with planned giving. We often think of our boards of directors as obviously very important components of success with fundraising in general and planned giving in particular. If, like me, maybe many of you have engaged in what you might call planned giving poker. Sometimes it's planned giving poker with individual donors. You know, will they do the gift or not? What interests them the most? How do we motivate them to the next level? And sometimes these folks we work with have certain tells, so we can tell whether they're interested or not. When it comes to our board, sometimes you think, well, they definitely want to support planned giving, but are they doing the best job possible or doing everything that is necessary to have a successful program? And we'll be discussing a lot of these ideas around adequate responsibilities assigned to board and staff. Do they play an active role in planned giving in one way or another? Do they take those rules seriously, or are they bluffing? Another way to look at what they're doing is, are they passing the buck? In fact, I get such a kick out of that phrase, the buck stops here. I had to learn, well, where does that buck idea come from? And as it turns out, it comes from the game of poker during frontier days. And apparently poker players would have these knives with a buckhorn handle. And if the dealer wanted to pass the dealing responsibility to somebody else, they would give the buckhorn knife, handled knife to another person. So passing the buck was passing the dealership in the poker game. One of my favorite presidents, Harry Truman, loved the phrase, the buck stops here. Of course, he was referring to the president's desk and that ultimate responsibility rested there. But as we like to think in our nonprofit organizations, that our board of directors have that ultimate placeholder for where responsibility stops. The buck stops with our board of directors. So consequently, during today's presentation, I want to discuss in some degree of depth 7 specific topics relative to involving your board in plan giving. We'll talk a bit about the law of governance of nonprofits and governance best practices, developing the case for plan giving in particular, the budget, approving an adequate budget for plan giving activities, marketing, training, and so forth, approving and helping implement policies and procedures for plan giving, thinking about fiduciary standards around plan gifts for investment of endowments, gift annuities, charitable trusts, etc. Goal setting, very important, whether it's an annual goal, a campaign goal. Do you have a specific plan giving goal in those contexts? And what's the board's role in that? And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, of course, what is the role that board members can play in plan gift fundraising? Can they help you ask for gifts? Can they make referrals for gifts? And how is that best done? We're going to be touching on all these topics in the next hour, or a little less than an hour now. As Jen indicated, we will stop at a couple, 3 different spots for you to ask questions. And if we don't get your question answered, I do volunteer to respond to any questions as a follow-up to today's program. So let's jump in. Let's begin with our first topic of the role of the board of directors relative to governance oversight, taking their job seriously. I do like to use a variety of cartoons in my presentations, and here's one where the board members are all sitting around the table showing the power sign, and the caption reads, "All power to the board." Well, yes, that's true in a very important legal sense, that the buck does stop with the board of directors. That may be good, that may not be well done. It's something for you to discern with your organization. But a beginning point, I would say, in understanding that the board has responsibility of plan giving, is that in fact, ultimately, it's an exercise of the legal duty of care that board members have on behalf of the organization. They have to exercise their duty of care with reasonable due diligence, attention, care, and skill, and they use the best judgment rule to implement this. You know, the fact of the matter is that so many of our organizations, depending upon the size, age, donor pool that you have for your organization, may be able to, first of all, focus on the needs of today. But so many plan gifts, of course, are about tomorrow. And so many of our nonprofit organizations do have a lifespan of theoretically forever. Not many nonprofits are by design meant to go out of business in the next 10 to 20 years. Rather, we do see a future for our organizations, and plan giving can play an important role in setting the stage for the future as part of that duty of care. But as we all know, plan giving conversation, plan giving fundraising helps bring in a lot of dollars today. In the portfolio of the 30 or so plan giving staff that I work with, as Nathan indicated, those portfolios draw in about 70 million a year in deferred type of plan gifts, but another 30 million a year in current use gifts, stock, IRA rollovers, you name it. Not to mention estate gifts that come to fruition during a particular year's time. So the point is obviously that the beginning understanding of board members is they understand they do have a legal duty of care, but they've got to connect the dots and understand that exercising duty of care involves plan giving. When we recruit our boards, we often like to recruit really top-notch people, a superhero board of directors. And in this cartoon, we see Batman and Superman and Ninja Turtle, Dick Tracy, other superheroes of the cartoon world to a board. Well, we like to have these superhero boards too. My question for you on this call is, do you have any board members who particularly understand plan giving? Do they have plan gifts? Do they have a background in nonprofit work that might involve plan giving? Have they been adequately educated in plan giving to be a superhero representative of plan giving around the board table? Maybe not all of them can be that advocate, but one thing I often like to say is that you need to have a champion or more than one champion for plan giving at the board level who understands it, gets it, and will advocate on its behalf. And the question is, who are your champions, if any, on your board of directors? Of course, there are many types of boards. We have, of course, the governing board. When I say duty of care, primarily I'm talking about the governing board that has legal authority over the affairs, the budget, the decision-making for your organization. But many organizations may have a related fundraising foundation, like public universities, which also have a legal duty of care. Some of you may organize with the use of supporting organizations that help fulfill the mission of a primary sponsored organization. And so therefore the supporting organization might have a separate board. There are also, of course, advisory boards, emeriti boards, and other volunteer boards, all of whom might be engaged with plan gift or plan gift fundraising or assistance one way or another. Most of my attention today, of course, is focused on a governing board, whether of a related foundation or the main organization that has ultimate responsibility for the affairs of the charitable entity. There are many different kinds of governance models that boards can adopt in approaching their important work. With many grassroots organizations, and I don't know how many on this call would consider yourself really a grassroots organization that may have few or no staff, but there typically boards of members are very hands-on, that their activity with plan giving or fundraising in general is very, very crucial and very hands-on. Then there is another model called Carver governance, where the board is really more as at advisory level, dealing with only specific bigger picture kinds of issues, and staff undertake all implementation procedures. There, the role of the board may be different than what I call the strategic governance model. And this would probably be the most common model used by the organizations on this call, where board members organize themselves by committees. They don't necessarily roll up their sleeves and do a lot of the day-to-day work as a grassroots board governance would, but they are involved quite actively. They may have one or more staff assigned to their committee to help facilitate conversation, and they may be quite active in reviewing budgets, reviewing goals, setting goals, and the like. So for the most part, for today's presentation, I'm talking about generally governing boards with a legal authority over the organization. And I'm talking about a governance structure where board members are involved in a strategic manner in the affairs of the nonprofit. When we talk about strategic affairs, we like to also think about strategic process. And I'm imagining that most of your boards of directors do engage in some level of strategic planning, helping the organization assure that it has a tested, a timely, and up-to-date and well thought out strategic plan. And most plans that I have seen are organized from a pyramid kind of approach. As fundraisers, we're familiar with pyramids. I often say that fundraising and nonprofits is a pyramid scheme, so to speak, from a positive point of view. But at the top or pinnacle of this strategic process is the board, because the buck stops there. They're ultimately responsible. But the board and staff together typically in the strategic governance model help work on setting and establishing appropriate goals across all aspects of activity, from fundraising, fund development, including plan giving, to budgeting, to program service delivery, and so forth. These goals are implemented by the design of specific objectives. And so you'd have specific plan giving objectives, marketing materials, website development, for example, education and training, number of contacts, all sorts of specific objectives around plan giving that would feed into a plan giving goal that might equally feed into an overall fundraising goal, fulfilling the mission. And then, of course, serving our objectives are necessary budgets, work plans, timelines, and the like. The role of the board might be even at this level, as, for example, in the ultimate approval of the budget, and maybe some say so in some of the elements of the budget, as well as goals and some timelines, perhaps, like say for a comprehensive campaign timeline, might be very actively involved in that kind of activity. I get a kick out of thinking about what the collective names of certain groups of animals are. As we all know, a group of fish is called a school, but I often ask the question, what is a group of vultures called? A group of vultures. Well, as it turns out, the name for a group of vultures is a committee of vultures. And my joke is, of course, the vultures like to pick things apart. And I know some of you have worked with board committees, and sometimes those committee members can really pick in and get into the weeds on matters quite readily. But the main point I like to make about committees in the governance model is that most state nonprofit corporation laws explicitly say, and the common law of most states explicitly say that the duty of care of a board is fulfilled by reasonable and prudent delegation to committees that we know are doing a good job, are composed of reasonable people who, while they may not be expert, let's say, in plan giving, they are reasonable in terms of securing good talent, listening to good counsel, and making good decisions. So there are different kinds of committees that many nonprofit boards have. I would imagine that many of you on this call have a fundraising or development committee of your board. But my question is, how many of you have a plan giving committee of your board? If you don't have a size of board which would justify, let's say, a separate plan giving committee, you could have plan giving topics on the development or fundraising committee of your board. The point of all this is that with the committee structure, the board itself at board meetings don't have to revisit every single issue that the committees do, that the committee can bore into details, can make recommendations, and generally the board should rely on these committees and can rely and not revisit every single detail that the committee has. So if you're going to have a champion on your board for plan giving, they need to reside in either the development committee of the board or the plan giving committee of the board. They can be on other committees too, most especially budget, let's say. But my point is that boards are exercising duty of care by delegating to committees, and you need to have a committee talking about plan giving, and you need to have a champion in that committee helping you. So now let's shift gears, going from governance issues, and now talk about developing the case for plan giving. Here's a cartoon. I'd like to open today's meeting with a review of our current brand promise, world-class excellence. And they're all sitting in a dilapidated office on boxes. They're not in a palatial suite, let's say. But my point is that many nonprofits, we don't have huge budgets for things, but we can still pursue excellence. And that's the point. You may not have a very strong plan giving program today, or you may what you consider to be have a good one, but there are ways to improve even more. And it's through this good governance, use of committees, and the other things we'll talk about today that you can pursue excellence, even if you're starting from scratch. So, of course, I'm a lawyer. Many I know who lead plan giving programs or involved with them are also lawyers. Probably have a lot of lawyers on the call. And we often think of ourselves as advocates. It just turns out that we're advocating for our donors, we're advocating for our plan giving programs. When we talk about a case for support, and fundraisers are all familiar with the concept of stating a case, I like to distinguish between an internal case and an external case. The internal case is your articulation of what you need for plan giving articulated to those who can make a decision about it. An internal case stipulated to your governing leadership, your CEO, and most especially in many cases, your CFO. And believe you me, I often like to say it's wise, if you can, to treat your business office like you would a donor, because their support for plan giving can be so helpful in so many ways. And I've run into situations where the financial team were contentious with plan giving for a variety of reasons, sometimes being short-sighted and not realizing that this is an important and effective program for the health of the organization and not just money 20 years from now and something not to spend any current dollars on out of the budget. So anyway, you've got to have an internal case for support for not only your staff leadership, but also your board committees and board leadership. And then you also, of course, we're expert at creating external case statements. That is, how do we articulate plan giving and the importance of plan giving for our donors? So what we would encourage you to do now is probably think more carefully about your internal case for support. And when we talk about cases for support, we're trying to connect the dots in the minds of the people who are listening to us. So in the case of donors, you're trying to connect the dots between your programs and the services provided. But most especially in the internal case, how your plan giving programs address the mission and purposes and programs for your organizations, and how these plan gifts provide the essential financial support to fulfill your mission in both the short and long-term vision of your organization. Very, very important. You've got to give thought to this. And so the question is your case for support close to the truth. As this slide says, this case statement comes perilously close to being accurate. Well, of course, that's what we want and hope for. And you're not going to build your credibility if in trying to articulate your case, you overemphasize things or over extract what you might be able to do. But the good news in plan giving these days, there's a lot of data out there. Oh my goodness. Research by Russell James, research by universities like the Lilly School of Philanthropy. Stelter has played a leading role over a long period of time in garnering resources and research for best practices, all sorts of good sources of great information to help you substantiate what your plan giving program can do if money is budgeted and goals are set and staff time allocated to this activity. So for building your case to the board, here are some talking points. It may not be relevant for everybody on this call, but go through them, think about them. First of all, of course, part of it is fulfillment of duty of care, as I've already said. And be sure to emphasize both current and future use planned gifts. Of course, I tend to define planned giving in a very broad sense to involve almost any gift that requires planning, tax considerations, use of an external advisor, independent counsel, that kind of thing. There are also issues around generational equity. Will the mission of our organization and programs and services be as relevant and helpful tomorrow as they are today and in the future? Of course, endowment giving is all about the future in many regards, but also they generate current important revenue source of income today. The past history, do we have a history of plan gift donors? You know, many organizations I've worked with, and I asked by show of hands, how many of you have ever received a plan gift? And most organizations, if they've been around a while, certainly have. But then I said, well, how many more plan gifts could you accrue if you actually were more strategic and impactful and proactive with your plan gift fundraising? So past history is very important. And as we also all know, that one key indicator of a plan gift donor is somebody who's a regular annual giver too. Loyalty, in other words, sometimes, volunteer, but annual giving, even a small dollar amounts, very helpful and important to chart a vision that plan giving can be more successful for your organizational future. We also have talked a lot over the last several years about the intergenerational wealth transfer. Here I am, a boomer. I'm right in that cohort of people who own a great deal of wealth. It's going to pass one way or the other. And even though the vast majority of my generation are not subject to the estate tax, we still have these retirement plans, big IRA accounts, trillions of dollars in retirement plans that are going to be income taxed, even if we're not in the estate tax. And but we have planning issues anyway about what will our legacy be? What do we want to see done with what we do have? So this wealth transfer, very important. Make your board aware of this wealth transfer. Make them aware that you have this big glut of baby boomers that you need to market to. Very important. You can compare yourself, benchmarking. Oh my goodness. Board members love to see and read and hear about benchmarks, especially with organizations that they consider your organization to be competitive with or aspiring to be. You may not be there yet, but okay, let's go look at this other organization that's ahead of us. What are they doing in plan giving? Why aren't we doing that? You can hire consultants to help with this kind of case development and using feasibility studies of, well, here's what a consultant says they can do with X dollars and possibly produce Y. So a variety of strategies can be used to build your case for support. Some other factors to consider is a board evaluation. How are you doing with board involvement in plan giving? Do you have a board job description? If you don't, board members need a job description. And what I recommend is when you're recruiting board members, you have them read this and agree to it and actually sign it. So the new board member would sign the job description with the current board president. And it's kind of like their contract or agreement with you. This is what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of these board member job descriptions say that they're going to serve on one or more committees. Let's make sure that the plan giving or development committee is on that list. And also board members often will say they will support the organization financially. Well, how about in addition to an annual contribution, a planned gift as well? So a goal of 100% of the board doing a planned gift, build it in the job description. That'd be something to shoot for. It may not be easy. I warn you of that, but it's worth giving it a shot. using the board committees with a description. So not only would your board members have job descriptions, but your board committees would have job descriptions too. Kind of a commission or a statement as to what that committee is going to work on. Make sure at least one of your board committees has planned givings somewhere in its words. I often like to joke, does anybody on a staff of a nonprofit have the actual words planned giving in their job description? Now, of course, many on this call are blessed to work for organizations that have maybe more than one person with planned giving in their job title, let alone just the words planned giving in their job description. But if you're a smaller organization and nobody at your nonprofit has the words planned giving in their job description and or in the job description of a committee or board members, then you need to work on that. And of course, boards are usually very involved in campaign planning. I'm a big advocate of a separate planned giving goal in campaigns. We'll talk a little more about that. Blending proposals, a big deal in campaigns and outside of campaigns, including asks for both current and future gifts and planned giving ideas embedded in those. Training. We've got to train our board members, and we'll talk about a few ideas for training and ongoing education. A lot of seminars available. I'm hoping perhaps even maybe there are some board members on this call today. If I were some of you and I saw this topic, I might be interested in that. Or you could, once you vetted this program, if you like it, show a replay of this to your board members, give them copies of the slides, help educate them about the role of planned giving. Anyway, here's a stopping point for any Q&A.
Hi, Phil. We have just a couple. One is a little more marketing centered, so I'm going to leave that one for the end. But we do have one from Sherry. You were just talking about a job description for the board that includes planned giving specifically. So she's asking if you have a good sample job description, to look at, and does it address possible ethical issues?
Yes, I do. And I can share that with Jen, who can share it with you.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Jen,
I think you
Jen,
said you had a couple things.
Help me remember to do that, Jen.
Okay, I will for sure. Okay, so yeah, Sherry, we'll get that. We have a couple other things, I think, to get out to you guys. So we'll include that as well. And Nathan, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just think, again, since we're stopping her here, I thought there was a great point you made, Phil, around the building a case. And one thing I just thought I'd share with the group, because knowing we have a broad bevy of types of charities on the call. The recently released National Standards for Gift Planning Success by CGP, it was specifically designed exactly what you just said. The first pillar is around getting support from the top. So that is just such a critical part. And I thought you brought up some really great ideas, including I love the job description for the board too. So I just wanted to make that point.
And then I'm sorry, I've had just a couple of people asking about the recording and the slides and if we're going to make them available. So yes, I just want to let you guys all know that again. I will send you guys an email when they're ready to grab from our website. And
Jen, I do notice the bottom of my slide is cut off a little bit. I don't know if you can fix that or not. It's not a big deal if you can't.
It's working on my side. So maybe let's see if any of the attendees, if they're cut off on your computer, if any of the attendees can go ahead and let me know in the Q&A, and I'll try to fix that. Otherwise, we have a couple other questions that just came in. How do you start the question with long-standing board members on becoming an annual donor, let alone a planned gift donor?
So if they're an annual donor, then they ought to, one way you can talk to them about planned giving is of course, thank them for their annual giving and encourage them to think about supporting their legacy with a planned gift, because their annual gift will ultimately go away. And so the planned gift is a way to establish the legacy, whether it's for an endowment or not. It's a way, and usually, as we all know, the planned gift is quite often the single largest gift that anybody will make. And so the board member can be made aware their annual gifts will, of course, ultimately end, and a planned gift is a way to maybe help replace that in either through an endowment or not. that would be one. You're going to hear some other strategies as we go along. I recommend, Jen, in the interest of time, we forge ahead now.
Sure.
And we'll get to any other questions. We've got 2 more stopping points too.
Okay, I did have some people write in and say that the slides are cut off for them. So Phil, I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this a little bit.
Okay.
So we'll make
It's
it
just
a little bit
Yeah,
smaller.
it's just a wee bit at the bottom.
Mm.
But everybody gets the slides anyway. And I've got copies of my slides. So.
Also, just on your own computer, just for the people who it's cutting off for, you can grab the edges of your Zoom window and you can pull them in like I'm doing here. And that will make it a little bit smaller. So hopefully that will help now.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, sounds good. Let's forge ahead. So now let's shift gears and talk about the role of the board in budget setting, because let's face it, it takes money to make money, right? You got to spend some to get some. And so one thing I encourage folks to take a look at is the Dan Pallotta talk. If you haven't done that, it's been out for a few years now. I put the link here on his TED talk, but basically Pallotta has been on this passionate stomp, encouraging charities to be careful about thinking of fundraising overhead as the be all and end all of evaluating the effectiveness or appropriateness of money budgeted for fundraising. And I'm here to tell you that's especially true with plan giving, because a lot of board members get stuck in their mind that it's all about money 100 years from now or 20 years from now or whatever. And so the fundraising overhead ratio issue becomes even more pronounced sometimes on some boards with regard to expenditures for plan giving. His point, obviously, is that at some level, who cares how much you're spending if the activity produces results and big results? And if you didn't spend that money, you may not get those bigger results. And that, again, might be especially true with plan giving, where the average gift size is much larger than in the average annual gift. And the number of donors, of course, is smaller too. But to find those small number of big gift, plan gift donors, usually you have to resort in some level of marketing and staff outreach and other activities to draw them in the door. I would say Pallotta's remarks became important enough for the charity watchdog groups like Charity Navigator, GuideStar, and the Better Business Bureau to issue a letter to America about the overhead myth. Go to this website and read it. Basically, they're saying, they don't reference Pallotta, but basically they're saying, look, don't donors, board members just rely on fundraising overhead as the ultimate authority on whether you're being efficient or good stewards of your dollars. Rather, instead, you got to take a broader scope view of what you're doing, what you're trying to do, and whether the actual expenditure can result in larger gifts now and in the future. Very important conversation. I know a lot of boards who get stuck on spending money, and listening to this YouTube and reading this letter to America can be very helpful to share with your boards of directors. I should also add that there are other considerations, such as it does take money to raise money. I've alluded to that. You can consider the age and sophistication of your program, and you can start small and build up when it comes to budgets. And that's not a bad idea. I've done it my entire career. But the key is showing success at the level you're at, and then using that as leverage to go to the next level. So you got to be smart and strategic about your expenditures now. Hire for the long term. There's a lot of churning in fundraising in general. It doesn't help plan giving when relationships are cut off through short-term hiring. And so we have to keep that in mind. Well, and I guess, go ahead and say it here now, as I've alluded to before, you've got to have staff. The biggest budget allocation to most charities is their staff costs, their salaries and benefits. And so the point is that, does anybody on your staff have the words plan giving in a job description? And I'm sure most of you on this call do, but is that enough? Do you need more? And that, of course, usually is the biggest budget item, is staff time allocation to plan giving. Very important. You can have accountability and goal measurements. And of course, the report that Nathan has referenced that CGP has come out with relative to measuring goals, setting goals, very important resource tool. I give a link to it later in the talk on a slide. You can report out cost to raise a dollar. You can of course, calculate cost to raise a planned gift dollar. And that's usually the cheapest expenditure you can have. When you've got these really large average planned gifts coming in, the cost to raise those planned gifts can be the most efficient, effective, and impactful imaginable. So for those on the board who kind of really do like to look at cost to raise a dollar, segregate out the planned giving program and calculate those costs separately just to kind of provide good ammunition. And again, commitment to both long and short-term results, as I've already alluded to. Again, components of the planned giving budget. I've already alluded to the importance of having professional staff. You've got to include training and consulting at some level. You know, your staff need to know what they're doing. They're going to be more efficient and effective. They can take advantage of free offerings like this through Stelter. God bless you, Stelter, for this. But there are all sorts of good resources out there that are free even for ongoing training. Factor in support staff, administrative overhead costs, marketing and communications, travel, cultivation, donor recognition, and ongoing stewardship that we'll be talking about. I'll never forget when I first started in planned giving, I worked for a wonderful man, but he was very financially frugal. He would not like to spend much money. And so I went to him one time for the desire to have planned giving software and a laptop and this is 30 years ago when laptops first came out, understand. And I said, I really want a laptop and I want planned giving software on the laptop. So when I go visit, I can do this on the road. Well, he said, no, can't do it. Sorry, we don't have the money. I said, well, how about if I asked Harmon, a member of our board who I knew was my champion for planned giving on the board, how about if he made a designated gift to the development, to our organization to help pay for this? My boss thought a minute and said, well, okay, we can do that, but only if Harmon does not reduce his otherwise important financial annual fund support or other programs he was supporting. I said, I think he would be willing to consider that. And sure enough, he did. He made a designated gift. We got it going and so forth. I'm aware of similar stories with other, not just board members, but other supporters who might make designated gifts for hiring staff on a short-term basis to get them started, ultimately with the organization assuming these costs in their operational budget once the initial purchase, let's say, is accomplished. The same approach can be taken with marketing materials. You know, get a donor to help underwrite the cost for the first year or two, and then you take it from there once you show results. But these are all good maybe strategies to involve boards. Now let's shift gears and talk about the role of the board in policies and procedures. Those of you who know me for a while, I'm a policy and procedure wonky kind of guy. I'm really in the weeds on these and I love talking about them. I won't do it too much. Here's a nice cartoon. You take two of these, the first sign of the onset of boardroom turbulence. You know, one way to deal with gift giving is, and the worries that board members have about gift giving is to use policies and procedures as a kind of medication, so to speak, whereby you're assuring your board that you're going to operate within these policies and procedures. But you have one very important policy, and that's the exceptions. That if there is an exceptional circumstance, you will bring that to the board or to another group as the board approves to give permission for an exception. But that can give a board great comfort that, for example, in terms of accepting real estate gifts, setting up charitable trusts, whatever the gift might be, you're going to operate within pre-approved guidelines that the board has approved. I distinguish between policies as broad statements approved by the governing board and procedures, more specific statements, but they can also be board approved as well. I like to do that. I like to educate the board in some degree of detail about our policies and procedures. Many of them find it quite fascinating, and you can find out who your champions are when you do that. Of course, all sorts of good reasons to have these good policies and procedures. I'm not going to go into great detail on these. You can read them. They're fairly self-explanatory. But I think it's important to put them here because these are, in a way, your case statement to your senior leadership and your board for doing policies if, in fact, you need to update them, or even, in fact, if you don't have any and need to create them from scratch. All sorts of good reasons why. Another reason why I love this cartoon, Far Side, Suddenly, a heated exchange took place between the king and the moat contractor. Well, he was building the moat on the inside of the castle wall rather than the outside. Well, again, good policies and procedures make sure everybody is following the right protocol to have the most productive gift plans possible. So again, more reasons why enhancing teamwork. And as you can see on all my slides, the word teamwork prominently, or maybe not always so prominently displayed, but the point is that we're all in this together. And if you see plan giving as a silo or something over in the corner somewhere, not engaged, not having some visibility at the board level, that's not going to be as helpful as possible for long-term success. The policies also allow for spectacular stewardship. And of course, maybe ultimately of all, an ability to say no in a graceful way. My board, for example, one policy I often have to pull out is donors who want to negotiate a higher charitable gift annuity rate than that which is recommended by the American Council on Gift Annuities. And I would say my board has authorized me to offer rates in compliance with ACGA rates, and let me explain why. But I use the board policy as my segue into answering the question with the donor. It lets the donor know that our governing group has thought about this and this is what they recommend. And you can use that in all sorts of gift scenarios that might otherwise become a little tricky. Here's another one. Hey, what's that clown think he's doing? And there's a clown at the control panel. Well, a lot of us sometimes feel like we're the clown because in plan giving, I don't care. I've been in it 30 years. I learn something new all the time. But I long ago got over the worry that I don't know everything. And with policies and procedures and whatnot, you'll get into circumstances where you'll be asked questions that you don't know the answer to. You got to live with it, got to deal with it. The key is go find the answer. Have a good help desk, get good answers, and your board members will respect you more if you show a willingness to admit, hey, I don't know that one, but I'll go find out. And let me tell you what the answer is and where I got it. You should work on policies and procedures, especially at the inception of a program. If you don't have them for a campaign, I've worked on many specialized policies and procedures just for campaigns. For example, what plan gifts will be counted towards a campaign? How will they be counted? How will we value them? Those kinds of things. Oftentimes, policies with board involvement arise when a problem gift pops up. Some prominent donor wants you to do something you don't feel comfortable with. Could be an ethical issue. So again, this is a great point where the board gets involved in ethical decision-making, to reference the question earlier. But it's a dynamic, not a static document. So it's a great way to involve board committees, plan giving committees. How do you work on these? This is the important process. It's personal to your organization. I like to involve literally everybody, including the board and board committees, in the process. Oh yeah? Well, maybe I'll just come over there and rattle your cage. If you work collaborative on these kind of policies, it's a great way to avoid siloed thinking, siloing between staff groups like major gifts, annual gifts, plan gifts, as well as siloing between the business office and fundraising, and or siloing between the staff and the board. Rather, collaborative across all of those interest groups. So a successful process, a lot of people get scared about these kinds of things. And I love this. You're at the gates in heaven, the pearly gates, and it's the math phobic's nightmare, where to get admitted into heaven, you've got to literally answer a math story problem. I'm not math phobic. A lot of people are, but so that's the vision of, oh my gosh, and they often, many folks and board members might even think about plan giving as a little scary, too technical. And sometimes really our job is to make plan giving accessible, not only to our donors, but to our leadership, our business offices, and our board members, so they understand not only why it's important, but kind of some detail about how it's done. So I like to have a draft prepared of policies and procedures, share with others, including the board committee for comments, revise as many times as you need, but final approval by the board. And you can make amendments as time goes by. And I've often been quite discerning and proactive about making amendments. It's a great way to keep plan giving in front of your board committee and your full board with that approval. I love this slide. I first saw it in law school. As you can see, many of you have seen it before. From one viewpoint, It's a painting of an elderly woman with a protruding nose and chin. If you look at it longer, you might see the face of a younger woman whose face is turned, and you see her eyelash and nose and the side of her chin. The point is that when we work on policies and procedures, when we talk about plan giving in general, perspective means everything. And some people just have very different perspectives. I've often liked to joke that the finance office often is cup half empty, and the plan giving or fundraising office is what? Cup half full. And so everybody's perspective on anything, even including plan gifts, can be very different. So you've got to, as you work with donors, you assess where they're at, what their questions are, what their needs are, and how to address them. You got to do the same thing with your board and your finance office and others to assess what their interests and needs are, to talk about plan giving in ways that actually meet their needs and address their questions and concerns. So what do you include? Well, I've got a list in here. I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but it's a nice checklist of what kind of policies should be included, as well as procedures for all the kinds of different types of plan gifts that you might consider, as well as assets for gifts, as well as a checklist of procedures. Let's pause here quickly for another quick Q&A before we have the final home stretch of the presentation.
Yeah, Phil, we've had a couple questions around board members and their age. Emily was talking about how her board skews younger, people in their 40s and 50s, who really are pretty limited in their plan giving knowledge. So she's wondering the best way to start educating them. And then we have another person that says, is it, should they be asking their younger board members for plan gifts, or should they focus on the older?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the asking thing here in the last section of the presentation relative to the education. Yeah, I'm very committed to ongoing education all the time. You should have, in a sense, I would write, just like you put down on paper your budget, you put down on paper your marketing plan, you should put down on paper your education plan. And have target groups for your education plan, the board, fellow staff, the business office. What 2 or 3 things for each of those target groups can I do to help expand their understanding and awareness of plan giving? One thing I've always done is have what I call brown bag plan giving. Now, when I spent 25 years in higher ed, well, we would do this physically in our office once a month, bring a brown bag, we'll sit around the table, and I invited, with permission of my CEO, I invited board members to this, and I'd have board members come. And here they are, they bring a sack lunch, and we talk about plan giving, and I'd have an announced topic. I might have guest speakers, I might have major gift staff also address the subject, all sorts of creative things. And we'd always have one party a year with our brown bag group. We made it fun, but we made it very educational. We also offered seminars for donors to attend before or after board meetings. And we'd offer, now you've got webinars you can make available to them, and copies of slides and materials. So now I'm virtual. Now I do virtual brown bags. And so, well, if anybody wants to have their lunch eating while they're doing the webinar with me or others that are speaking, that's something. You can also give board members, a manual. They can put their policies and procedures in it. And you could have other good educational brochures, definitions of terms, other things in addition to their policies and procedures. Lots of creative ways. We've only scratched the surface, but the key lesson I would say is be intentional about it. Be intentional, come up with a plan and work it and revise it over time as you learn. So I'm going to push on. If anybody has questions that are not answered, I do promise I'll get around ultimately after the webinar with any of those. So now let's talk about the role of the board in evaluation. And as Nathan alluded to, we now have the wonderful guidelines for gift planner performance metrics from Nacgp. If you go to the CGP website, you've got to read this. It's an amazing resource, a great way, because look, we're fundraisers, all of us. We've got to have some metrics or measurement and accountability measure. Board members, the business office, they love the word accountability. So don't fight it. You got to accept it. The key is to make that accountability measure make sense for you as a plan gift fundraiser. And that's exactly what these guidelines try to do, is make sense of how the measures, Take ownership over it, get ahead of it so you don't end up with metrics that make no sense for plan gift fundraising for your organization. When you talk about program, not just personal metrics of the fundraiser, but performance evaluation, you've got to consider the age and sophistication of your organization and program. Do you have adequate budget for it? What are we not spending money on that would help us substantially? You could send stewardship audits to your donors to find out how happy they are with their gift annuities, with your plan giving recognition program, with your endowment stewardship management, etc. Learn a lot from different sources to evaluate your program. And of course, you can share these results. And I should have mentioned on that prior slide, consultants, if you need a consultant, take a look at it, whether a marketing consultant or a program specific consultant, that's another good way to do it. But in any event, you provide evaluations and results, regular reports to your board. Keep plan giving visible to the extent you're able to do so. Measure and report new plan gift expectancies alongside matured. I like to think of it as two pipelines. We got the pipeline of gifts where donors have passed and it's a state gift in process. And now I've got a pipeline where donors are alive and we've got estimates either given by the donor or by us of what that plan gift might be. So now we have these two, and you share those numbers with your board, and they add up to an amazing, sometimes, testimony of the power and value of plan giving, both the states and that are coming to fruition, as well as living donors who have made commitments to you long term. You can also measure number of contacts, new plan giving society members, endowment gifts, non-cash gifts, and as I've mentioned before, cost to raise $1 for plan giving. Let's talk briefly about the role of the board with regard to fiduciary standards. We, of course, have charitable endowments and other funds that are governed in all states except Pennsylvania by the Uniform Prudent Management of Institutional Funds Act, which generally gives the descriptions of how you satisfy the duty of care relative to investment management. It's the word prudent is in the name of the law. And I often ask the question, prudent who? You know, prudence in my vernacular is a verb, not a noun. So it means that the board is the prudent party expected to exercise these standards for effective long-term management of your organization. So it's a board-driven responsibility. CGP has another set of valuation recommended standards you can get free of charge off their website. There's trustee duties if you trustee trust, charitable gift annuities. You can visit the ACGA website for more information about the assumptions behind gift annuities. And of course, prudence around complex asset giving. And that's, of course, all of these to some extent are, especially complex assets, laid out in your policies and procedures manual. Now let's talk a minute about goal setting and goals. Of course, you could have annual goals just for plan giving. Again, consider the age and sophistication of your program, evaluate in terms of long-term benefits. I often like to say, if you're a new program, you might, for the first couple of years, consider activity goals and not necessarily dollar goals. There are some consultants who created a dollar goal worksheet. A lot of times, worksheets on goal setting for the future, if you're had a long-standing plan gift program, like to look back and do some sort of average of your track record over time in projecting a future goal. But you can also link a goal to a number of contacts. The point is that your business office, your board love goal setting. They love to see accountability around goals. And you can take the lead on this and be proactive about it, but put it together and maybe involve your board in approving your plan gift goal if you get permission to do so. You can also have campaign goals. And I'm a big advocate of, if you have a fundraising campaign, whether it's a building campaign, a comprehensive campaign, whatever it is, have a plan gift goal. A plan gift goal, not, and you got to make very clear that for a campaign, the plan gift goal does not mean to reduce the cash you need for that, from that campaign, whether it's building a new building, creating an endowment now, funding certain strategic needs in the next 5 to 10 years, whatever it is. but you're leaving money at the table if you don't talk to those donors in a campaign about a potential plan gift too. As long as you state your case for the current gift, emphasize that, but also state your case how the plan gift can help as well. If it's a building, how about an endowment fund for ongoing building maintenance? If it's a program, how about plan gifts that will provide additional monies in the future for that program so it'll be sustained once the money from the campaign is spent? All these kinds of arguments or cases can be made for incorporating plan giving, a plan gift goal in any campaign. But the key to that usually is you've got to assure everybody that it can be done in a way that will not reduce the cash on the barrelhead, that you've got to inspire folks to give the cash now. But while you're talking to them, a lot of them will say, well, I can only do X in cash, but you know what? I can do an additional Y through a deferred plan gift. Well, my goodness, there you're being smart. There you're not leaving money at the table when you're talking about closing that Y gift for a plan gift. So now let's spend our remaining minutes on the role of the board in fundraising. All those in favor of raising the campaign's goals signify by doubling their gift commitment. Well, we have some board members who are totally into fundraising and are good at it. Some board members who never want to talk about their gifts, and we don't want them in the next county when we're asking for a gift. They're not good at it. But we can ask the board to consider a 100% goal, both of an annual outright gift or a campaign cash gift, and also a planned gift. Why not challenge in this way? You can have challenge plan gifts, matching plan gifts, and specific plan gift support. Let's talk about a few of these. The challenge match. So we've often, many of us on this call have been a part of a matching program. And I'd say many charities are now involving plan gifts towards the challenge match. It can be handled a number of different ways. One way would be that for every plan gift dollar that's committed, that another donor, like the matching grant donor, or even the board of directors as a group, could offer up some sort of, for every plan gift dollar, they'd offer $1. It could be 1 for 1, 10 for 1, however you want to structure it, up to some maximum amount, and maybe subject to some certain time limit. But I think it's a good idea to have challenge matches, even for planned gifts. It could be, but it's what we're talking about is maybe leveraging current gifts in exchange from the match provider, in exchange for planned gifts from other donors. It's helping them realize that we value your planned gift and we know it's going to be maybe something in the future. So we're going to put cash on the barrelhead now to help you feel good about that deferred gift as well. And a board could be involved in this match. They could be the ones offering the match. Board members can be involved in donor identification and qualification. They can review lists. They can suggest potential donors, all of which is in confidence. And it can be done either within a committee structure or individually. Board members obviously very involved in helping open doors, introducing staff to key people, providing testimonials. We all know that the testimonial, there's research in marketing to justify the use of the testimonial as marketing gold, let's say. So speeches, names on an annual report, stationery, campaign committees, whatever, but specific stories about why I did a planned gift, why it was meaningful to me, avoiding legalese, being very inspirational, telling the story, but answering the question, why? And you want them to also say, and that planned gift, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And I did a bequest, or I did a terra remainder trust. And you could consider this too. And if you want to learn more, talk to Bob or Mary or whoever the plan giving staff person is. So you want them to say they did it without a lot of legalese, but then to encourage other donors to talk to you about how it's done. They can host individual events, social events, and they can be involved in creating cultivation solicitation plans for specific donors. They can be involved in solicitations. They can help qualify to maximize success. I encourage peer-to-peer solicitations, of course, in this regard. If they're going to solicit, maybe it's best, obviously, in many cases, for a staff member to be alongside, whether it's a CEO, plan giving director, whoever is appropriate. You can use scripts, role playing, etc. Again, it'll probably be a minority of board that would be involved in this and would be good at it. But if you have a good one at this, boy, they can be very effective. Donor recognition, board members love to say thank you usually, so they can make personal visits, calls to say thank you, notes, be a part of presentations. Involve your board in donor recognition, especially plan gift donor recognition. One thing I didn't put on this slide with regard to donor recognition, I don't think, is with regard to your plan giving societies. And my recommendation is, of course, that you have a plan gift recognition society, and that you might consider a charter membership enrollment. So if you have either a new plan gift recognition society or moribund or one that's not very active, have like a 2 or 3 year plan giving campaign. You could have a challenge match with regard to that. But everybody who steps up to the plate and says they've got a planned gift in that 2 to 3 year time frame would forever be known as a charter member. They might have a special symbol next to their name in the report on the list of the names. And if you're just starting with a program like this or trying to revive one, then board members, in my opinion, would be low-hanging fruit to be charter members. They can exercise their duty of care, help you be successful in plan giving to get this program rolling by being charter members of your plan gift society. Look, if you've already got an existing plan gift society, encourage them to get their name on that list by doing a plan gift. Why? Because their role as a board member is powerful testimony to everybody else. Obviously, donor stewardship, ongoing care and love for our donors, our plan gift donors, very important. Board members serve as your eyes and ears. They can share comments with staff. They can help host stewardship events, help deliver stewardship reports, whether it's a life income plan report, an endowment report. I'm creating just a general plan gift stewardship report, thanking all of our plan gift donors to the Army for their plan gift, whether it's a bequest, a beneficiary designation, or whatever, with a nice, testimonial stories in it, some financial information, etc. An annual outreach to steward your plan gift donors. We all know that as people age, they can change their plan gifts. Russell James and others have researched this. As people age, they do make changes. So in a way, every year that a donor does not revoke or change their plan gift to you is perhaps a new gift to you. So stewardship is the ongoing means we have to make sure that these commitments remain for our institutions. So it's time to wrap up. We're out of time. I hate that. I'm sorry. I love talking to you. But overall, we hope that you will work hard with your board so that they avoid playing plan giving poker with you and they avoid passing the buck. Instead, we want everyone to feel like they're part of the team and everybody, including the board, on board with planned giving. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I think we will take some additional questions here at the end.
Hi, Phil. We'll just do one quick one. We're a little over time now. So we did have a couple people. You talked about having a legacy society and wanting your board members to be part of that. What is a good percentage, or what's the average percentage of board members that do leave a planned gift? What's a good percentage?
Yeah, a good percentage is 100%. My experience is I've worked with a lot of boards and I've been astonished how difficult it is to get to 100%. So in 30 years, I have a lot of experience in trying to get to 100%. And I realize it is really hard for a lot of reasons, a lot of interesting reasons. Some board members just don't want to tell you. They feel like it's their business, not yours. Some are shy. They say, maybe I've done it, but I don't want my name on a list. And so I try to convince them that lending your name is important. I guess that a good reasonable expectation would be 50 to 75%. That would be a reasonable thing to really shoot for. I would always articulate a goal of 100%. I mean, I'm just not bashful that way. But I think in the back of your mind, realistically, if you end up with 50 to 75%, you've done really well.
Okay. I'm looking, we still do have about 200 people on the call, so we are over time. I apologize. We're recording the webinar today, so if you don't mind hanging on for just a few more minutes, Phil, and answering a couple more questions, we could do that.
I am perfectly fine with that.
Okay. And Nathan, did you have anything you wanted to add in?
No, I'd say let's
Okay.
cruise some of these questions.
All right, let's cruise through some of them. Jonathan was wondering, you talked about setting benchmarks in comparison with peer organizations. He's wondering, where would you find specifics on that?
Well, of course, it depends on what subsector of the nonprofit world or space you're in. Higher ed being higher ed, they got benchmarks all over the crazy place. You got CASE, Council for Advancement Supportive Education. You got subsectors like private college groups that have benchmarks. Another subsector that has a lot of benchmarking available data are community foundations. They have a lot of benchmarking data. They benchmark with each other. Arts groups, there might be some museum sharing of data. So it's going to depend on your organization where you might go and look for data. There's always also just zeroing in on the organizations that for one reason or another, you are become aware they have effective plan giving. Somebody has recommended them to you, you go to their website and you see their activity. And then so pick up the phone and call them and just say, hey, I'd love to treat you to lunch and pick your brain on what you're doing right and what some of your results are if you're willing to share. A lot of these organizations, maybe some data be available on the public disclosed 990, maybe not. But my point is that some subsectors have a lot of data readily accessible, others really not so much, and you'll just have to kind of be creative and reach out to specific people. Consultants sometimes are good at this. They may have some access to data. There are consultant groups that have specialized in subsectors too. And some consulting firms have actually made it their point to collect data and are good at that as well. I think, anyway, and Nathan might want to speak into that too.
No, I think you're spot on. And I think, that's actually some of the impetus of the first round or first phase of the national standards is to create some consistency in how we all track and our nomenclature and this, that, and the other. Because ultimately we want to have benchmarks that are applicable to the size, type, subsector of our shops.
Yeah, I'm in the Salvation Army and we're divided the country to 4 territories. So I regularly talk to my other 3 colleagues who have my job in other territories and we cross compare. And there aren't many other organizations quite like us and how we do things. So we kind of benchmark against each other. So you got to take each case as you find it.
Okay, Lisa's wondering if there's a program that you would recommend for a comprehensive professional education about plant giving. She's looked into a couple different programs, but they're quite expensive. So she's just wondering if you have any recommendations.
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, the CAP program from the American College at a professional designation is a good one. The Lilly School of Philanthropy, they have one plan giving course that is just a basic plan giving education. It's like Plan Giving 101. And then there is the, the American Institute of Philanthropic Studies, which has, it's kind of a year-long program. That's at Long Beach State, California State, Long Beach. And they have a program, the Certified Specialist in Plan Giving. It's kind of a year-long program and you really marketing, administrative issues and that's a good one. Many of the vendors, some of the plan giving vendors have some training available, like Stelter has this webinar series, which is amazing. The CAP, of course, is a deep dive on the techniques, maybe not so much on the administrative side. I don't have the CAP. I can't speak quite into detail what they do on the administrative side. Those would be a few. Send me that one. If I think of more, I'll send you an email with more maybe options there.
Okay, we actually have a recommendation that came in from Molly. She says North Park University has an online fundraising management certificate program and a course on plan giving, and you can pursue an M&A. So North Park University.
Oh, I've heard of them and they're quite good. Yeah, the Lilly School of Philanthropy has a master's in philanthropy. They have the certificate of fundraising management, but Plan giving, they have just one plan giving course, and then other courses will refer to plan giving in the context of management. That's the way a lot of those kinds of fundraising management curricula are designed. But plan giving specific, the American Institute of Philanthropic Studies, that has a degree, that's a year-long process. The CAP is a deep dive in techniques, that's for sure. Yeah, so I'll give more thought to that.
Okay. We have a couple of questions about plan giving advisory committees, Janet and Julie. Janet's lobbying her boss to establish one. So she's looking for maybe a sample job description. And then Julie is asking, like, really, what's your opinion about them?
Well, when I hear the word plan giving advisory committee, I'm thinking of a group of professional advisors like lawyers, accountants, allied professionals, which can include board members too. That's a good point. I have high regard for that kind of activity. And that's a kind of group, what you got to be careful with them, of course, is that they're busy people. You might turn to them, be careful on, don't try to overschedule them for meetings, and be careful with overextending your welcome and asking questions. Some will be readily more available than others. You just have to figure it out individually with them. A lot of them, they really like and appreciate the opportunity to meet potential clients. So asking them to do free seminars, webinars for your plan gift donors, well, they'd love to do that, because now you're presenting them as an expert in front of an audience that they might get clients, but be real careful. You'd have to make sure you pick the best ones out to do that kind of thing. Others might get jealous. So you're gonna have to spread the love around among many people, perhaps. Also, it's good to have a degree of viewpoint. So a lawyer, an accountant, a financial planner, these different perspectives might be important to balance out in such a webinar or something, or an in-person donor seminar. A lot of charities provide ongoing continuing professional education. We do a big one like that in the Army, and that's a way to build bridges with advisors. But similar to the board members, I would create a job description for the group. I would invite them to think that is a group that loves to hobnob with your board of directors. So invite them to a social activity. You could they could do a training thing, and then they hang out with your board before a board meeting. They would enjoy that. It's a way to involve them with your board. So those are some ideas.
Great. I'm going to ask one more. We're about 15 minutes over. So one more. This person sent it very early on, so I don't want to leave him out or her out. This person works for a university, and they're wondering if you've had success in getting plan gifts from trustees who are not alumni.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, that's where the job description becomes real handy to kind of introduce and warm them up. I have to be honest. Some of the most loyal, dramatic gifts that I've worked on, especially in the higher ed setting, have been by non-alumni. They fall in love with the school and can be as passionate about the school as alumni. So I've had a lot of good experiences with non-alum, especially board members, as plan gift donors. So I've had good luck there. The key is recruiting people to a board who are passionate about, obviously, the organization, whether it's higher ed or anything else. It's like all giving, but plan giving obviously is the most loyal form of giving we all can imagine. And people are putting you in their plans right next to their family members. I mean, it's just an astonishingly kind of personal decision. And so a lot of these board members, whether they're alumni or not, this is a highlight of their life quite often. This is a big, big thing for them. And so as long as they feel like the experience is positive and not a negative experience, which can happen, then yeah, I would say be very confident that you can solicit and close significant plan gifts from non-alumni board members.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. As Phil said, if you do have additional questions, you can reach out to him personally. His address is on the screen. And I'm also going to be sending him the questions that you all sent in today. And he said he would personally answer them. So thank you so much, Phil, for your time on doing that. Sure. If anyone has questions about the series or Stelter, what we do, you can reach out to Nathan or myself, or you can visit us on our website at stelter.com. And then finally, we did record it today, so we'll offer the recording, PDF of the handouts, and then so many policies and procedure type documents, right? We've had so I'll go through, but there's so many people have been asking for, oh, does he have a document for that and that and that? So I'll work with Phil. We'll see what he has that he wants to offer. We'll get those all ready for you on our website, and I'll send you an email when those are ready for you to get to. So that's what we have for you today. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I think we had close to 300 people here for the last hour plus. Phil, thank you so much for spending your time. Always very appreciated.
Well,
And
thank you. And my thanks to the Stelter company for their good work.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Phil. Terrific way to start off 2022.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jan.